They said I belonged in the garage, and they meant it. On Thanksgiving Day, my own mother handed me paper plates and told me, "You're used to scraps." Hi, I'm Madison Taylor, single mom, writer, and until that moment, the invisible one in the family. But while we sat shivering in that cold garage, something happened that no one expected. A black limousine pulled up and asked for me. What happened next changed my life, and maybe, just maybe, the way I see myself forever. Have you ever felt pushed aside by your own family, left out of the story you were born into? Tell me, what would you have done in that garage? I balanced the sweet potato pie in my arms like it was a centerpiece from a bakery, even though Lily and I had made it together in our tiny kitchen the night before. The crust was uneven, the topping slightly burnt, but she dusted cinnamon across the top with such care that I hadn't had the heart to scrape it off. Her hands were still sticky with marshmallow when she looked up at me and whispered, "Do you think Grandma will like it this time?" I told her yes, because you don't tell a 9-year-old that some people measure love in status and serving trays. We stood just outside the front door of Caroline's house, Ethan shifting from foot to foot beside me, trying to pretend he wasn't cold. He wouldn't admit it, but I could tell. His jacket was a bit too thin for late November in Ohio. Lily tugged at her dress, the one she picked out herself at a secondhand shop, and declared, "Perfect for Thanksgiving." I knocked once, then turned the knob. No one ever answered the door here. You were supposed to walk in like you belonged. Inside, the house was warm, but not welcoming. The polished floors gleamed like ice under our feet, the faint scent of pine cleaner, fighting with roasted turkey and some kind of rosemary glaze. Caroline's kitchen looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Glistening copper pots, fresh eucalyptus in a white vase, napkins folded like origami. I looked for my mother, hoping for at least a nod, a half smile, anything resembling acknowledgement. She was seated in the living room, her glass of Chardonnay tilted delicately in one hand, watching Caroline's kids do a little choreographed dance to Christmas music that played faintly through the speakers. Her lips curled into a smile that barely touched her eyes. "Hi, Mom," I said, loud enough to be heard but quiet enough not to interrupt. She looked over, blinked once like I'd startled her, and turned back to the dance. "You look tired," she called out vaguely, not to me, not to anyone in particular. Her voice had that signature inflection, as if concern had been dipped in criticism and served with a garnish of indifference. Caroline emerged from the kitchen in heels far too high for a woman sautéing green beans. Her lips were lined, her hair pulled back in an effortless bun that likely took 40 minutes and a professional stylist. "Oh," she said when she saw me. "You brought something. That's cute." Her eyes landed on the pie and then flicked past it. Blake strolled by, his wine glass sloshing just slightly, Bluetooth still in his ear like he was taking a call from the boardroom. "Hey, Cal," he said, using a nickname I hadn't liked since high school. "Kids look big." Ethan said nothing. Lily stood a little straighter, clutching the pie. "Can I give Grandma the pie now?" she whispered. I nodded. "Go ahead, sweetheart." She walked carefully toward Margaret, offering the pie with both hands like it was something sacred. My mother took it, looked at it for a beat, then said, "Oh, sweet potato. How quaint." She turned her head before Lily even finished smiling. I wanted to shrink, to disappear into the hardwood, but I just kept standing, hoping someone, anyone, would notice that this felt wrong. Dinner was about to start. I figured maybe the awkwardness would settle. Just 1 hour, I told myself. We could sit through 1 hour. Then Caroline came around the corner with a stack of paper plates. "We're a little tight on space," she said loud enough for the room to hear. "So I set up a little something for you guys in the garage." I blinked, almost laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. "The garage," I echoed, waiting for a smirk, a wink, something to tell me we were all in on it. She smiled, but it wasn't kind. It was the kind of smile you give someone when you've already decided they don't matter. "Yeah," she said, as casual as reading a grocery list. "You're used to scraps, right?" And then it was quiet. Forks stopped clinking. No one looked at me. No one looked at her. It was the kind of silence that says everything by saying nothing at all. I felt Ethan shift beside me, and I knew if I looked at him, I'd see the tight jaw, the flushed ears. Lily froze in place, still staring at the spot where Grandma had turned away. And me. I smiled. That brittle practice smile I'd worn for years, the one that says, "I'm okay. This doesn't hurt. I'm used to this." I reached out, took the stack of paper plates from Caroline's hands, and turned toward the back hallway. No one stopped me. No one said a word. The hallway leading to the garage was dim and smelled faintly of lemon polish and disuse. As I pushed open the door, the chill hit us like a wall, sharp and metallic. The garage was mostly empty, save for a folding table pushed against the far wall and two mismatched metal chairs. A booster seat, probably left over from one of Caroline's kids, sat dusty in the corner. There were no place settings, no decorations. A roll of paper towels lay sideways next to a plastic bag with styrofoam trays of turkey and beans. I laid the plates down slowly, my fingers stiff from the cold. Ethan stood still, his breath visible. Lily brushed off the crate she'd chosen as a seat and tried to smooth her dress again. She looked up at me, her eyes bright, uncertain. "Is this where we're eating?" she asked. I nodded. She didn't say anything else. Just sat down, pulled her sleeves over her hands. I tried to busy myself with arranging the food. The turkey was lukewarm, the green beans rubbery. There was no gravy, no cranberry sauce, just beige. Ethan finally sat. He didn't touch his food. The laughter from inside the house floated through the walls, muted but sharp. I looked at my son. He wasn't angry. He was still. And that stillness, like resignation, cut deeper than rage. He turned to me and asked, "Why didn't anyone say anything?" I looked at him, his eyes too old for 12. I swallowed, steadying my voice the way I had 1,000 times before. "Because," I said, "this is what they think love looks like." And outside, the wind howled softly against the garage door, as if the world was listening. The garage smelled like motor oil, leftover cardboard, and rejection, the kind of smell that seeped into your clothes, clung to your skin. It reminded me of the days I used to pick up weekend shifts at the auto parts store, just to stretch our grocery money through the end of the month. Back then, the air held more oil than air, but at least no one looked at me like I didn't belong. Tonight, that air hung between me and my children like a fog we couldn't breathe through. I unfolded the paper plates slowly, the stack stiff and cheap. They buckled slightly at the edges. I laid them out on the folding table, next to a roll of half-used paper towels and the styrofoam containers Caroline had passed me without a word. Turkey slices, thin and curling at the edges, green beans, cold and limp. One scoop of mashed potatoes, already stiff. No butter, no gravy, just enough to make sure no one could say we weren't fed. I moved methodically, mechanically, the way people do when they're trying not to feel. When Ethan was 6, he asked me why Grandma never visited on his birthday. I remember drying my hands on a dish towel, trying to keep my voice light. "She's just busy, sweetheart," I said. I smiled when I said it. I lied when I said it. I've been lying like that for most of my life. Lily climbed onto the old booster seat in the corner and wriggled, trying to find a way to sit that wouldn't make her dress bunch awkwardly. She tugged at the hem, her brows furrowed. Then carefully, she reached for the plastic utensils and began lining them up beside the plate with such precision it broke something inside me. "Like this, right?" she asked, not looking at me. "Fork on the left?" I nodded, clearing my throat. "Yes, baby, that's perfect." I turned to Ethan. He hadn't sat yet. He stood stiffly at the edge of the table, staring down at the food like it had personally insulted him. He was still wearing his jacket. His jaw was clenched, lips pressed so tightly they were almost white. "Ethan," I said softly. He looked at me for a moment, then pulled out one of the metal chairs with a scrape that echoed in the quiet. We ate in silence. Or at least we tried. every so often, laughter from inside the house would float through the walls. Sharp, sudden. It always made Lily flinch. Someone clinked a wine glass against another. A burst of applause. The TV playing football, a touchdown call. It was like being just outside of something warm and golden, watching it without being invited in. I poked at my potatoes, then looked at my son. He hadn't touched his food, just held the plastic fork loosely in one hand. "Ethan," I said again. He didn't look up. "Why'd they put us out here?" The question landed like a stone, not because I didn't have an answer, but because I did, and I didn't want to say it out loud. Before I could respond, Lily's voice came, softer than his. "Did we do something bad?" She looked at me then, really looked. Her big eyes glistened in the dim garage light. Her nose was pink from the cold, and her curls had started to flatten under the weight of the air. She wasn't asking if she had done something wrong. She was asking if we had. And I felt it again, that slow unraveling, the kind that doesn't happen in one moment, but over years. A million small cuts from the people who should have known better, who should have loved better. I swallowed hard, smoothed her dress gently just to have something to do with my hands. "No, baby, we're not the ones who did anything wrong." She nodded like she understood, but her shoulders stayed hunched as if she was waiting for more hurt. Ethan placed his fork on the plate quietly, deliberately. That sound, soft plastic on paper, somehow louder than everything else. I looked down at my own plate, barely touched. I'd thought coming here would be worth it, that maybe this year would be different, that maybe, if we tried just one more time, they'd see us. Not the failure they'd decided I was, not the single mom with the beat-up sedan and freelance jobs and second-hand dresses. Just us. Human. Family. I realized then, in that small, freezing garage, that I'd been chasing a place at their table my entire life. And every time I got close, they moved the table, changed the rules, rewrote the guest list. I thought about holidays before. Easter when they forgot to send our invitation. Lily's birthday when no one showed up from my side of the family. The Christmas my mom sent a gift for Ethan, but not for Lily. How many times had I made excuses on their behalf? Told my kids they were loved even when we weren't even remembered? This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about what my children were learning from how I allowed myself to be treated. The cold crept in deeper. I rubbed my hands together, watched Lily bite her lip and take a tiny bite of green beans, watched Ethan sit still, hands in his lap. Then, headlights. They cut across the driveway, bright and slow. We all turned. The light bounced off the garage wall, slid across the table, caught the corner of Lily's plate. A car was pulling in, not a compact sedan, not an SUV, a black limousine. It didn't stop at the front entrance. It moved with quiet purpose around the side of the house, around to us. I looked at Ethan. He looked at me. His expression had changed, guarded curiosity now replacing the quiet pain. The engine idled for a moment. Then it cut. Outside, silence returned. But something had shifted. And for the first time that evening, I wasn't afraid to see what came next. Nobody drives a limousine into a cul-de-sac on Thanksgiving, unless something very unexpected is about to happen. And in the middle of that cold, quiet garage, surrounded by paper plates, rubbery green beans, and my children's fragile silence, I couldn't imagine what kind of unexpected this was. The engine purred softly outside, low and steady, like the heartbeat of a creature that didn't belong in our story. I sat frozen, half leaning over the table, a fork still in my hand. Ethan glanced at me. Lily had stopped mid-bite, the fork dangling in the air, her eyes wide. The headlights cut across the side wall again, briefly illuminating the duct-taped water heater and a pile of old paint cans. I stood slowly, stepping toward the grimy garage window, wiping a circle into the condensation with my sleeve. Through the foggy glass, I could make out the sleek black car, long, glossy, and out of place in a neighborhood like this. It didn't stop at the front door like I expected. No, it turned deliberately, gliding down the side path, past Caroline's manicured hedges and toward the back of the house. Toward us. I felt Lily slip her hand into mine. "Is it for Uncle Blake?" she whispered. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't know how. The car slowed to a crawl and finally stopped in front of the garage. The engine cut off. Silence again. The air around us changed, not just in temperature, but in pressure, like something sacred was about to unfold. Ethan moved beside me. "That's not normal," he said quietly, not afraid, just observant, as always. The driver stepped out first, tall, composed, gloved hands. He adjusted his cap and walked around to the rear door. There was a pause, just a breath longer than necessary before he opened it. And then a man emerged. He wasn't flashy. No gold cufflinks or flashy watch. His coat was navy blue wool, the kind that whispered class without needing to raise its voice. His shoes were polished but sensible. His face was lined but kind, his hair silver and neatly parted. He didn't hesitate, didn't glance toward the front of the house. He walked straight toward our garage. I opened the door halfway and stepped into the cold. He stopped just short of the threshold, smiled with quiet ease, and said, "Excuse me. I'm looking for Madison Taylor." The wind rustled a pile of leaves against the pavement behind him. I blinked, unsure if I was dreaming. "I'm Madison," I said cautiously. "Can I help you?" He smiled again. It wasn't the kind of smile you use when you want something. It was the kind you offer when you already know you've found what you're looking for. "Madison Taylor," he repeated softly, as though confirming something for himself. "I'm Andrew Voss. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit called Women Forward. We're headquartered in Cleveland, but we work nationally." I stared at him, unsure whether to nod or offer a handshake. I didn't move. "You wrote something last year," he continued, "a piece on Medium titled Last to the Table. It was about being invited out of obligation, about showing up anyway, and about how sometimes survival is more courageous than success." I felt Ethan shift beside me. Lily looked up, confused. I remembered that piece. It was raw and messy. I'd written it one night after putting the kids to bed, fingers trembling, heart exposed. I'd never shared it widely, just posted it on my dusty blog and then ignored it. "I read it," Andrew said, "and I sent it to our staff. That article became the opening reflection in our January strategy meeting. We've been following your work ever since." I shook my head a little, stunned. "You've been following me?" He nodded. "Your writing. It makes people feel seen and heard and not alone. We're planning a national summit this spring, a gathering of women leaders, advocates, teachers, survivors. We want you to open it as our keynote speaker." It took me a moment to process what he was saying. "Me?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "You." I looked down at myself. Still in the coat I'd bought at Goodwill last season, still wearing scuffed boots, still smelling faintly of garage floor and turkey steam. He must have seen the doubt in my eyes, because he said gently, "You don't need to change a thing, Madison. We're not asking you to be anyone else, just to be you. The woman who writes with honesty, the mother who sees her kids, the person who shows up even when the room is cold." Behind him, through the windows of Caroline's house, I saw the silhouettes begin to gather. Margaret standing stiff near the curtains. Caroline, her hand holding a wine glass mid-air. Blake, frozen behind her. They were watching. Every single one of them. "Wait," Ethan said, stepping closer. "He wants you to speak? Like, in front of people?" Andrew turned toward him, eyes twinkling. "Yes, because your mom is extraordinary." Ethan didn't answer, but his shoulders shifted, just slightly. The kind of shift you make when you're starting to let go of something heavy you've been carrying too long. Lily squeezed my hand. "Is this real?" she asked. I crouched down beside her and smiled. It's real, baby. Andrew handed me a thick envelope. This has everything. Travel details, timelines, support we'll provide. We'll cover childcare, transportation, anything you need. And Madison, we'd also like to publish your story, properly, with your name on the cover. I stood slowly, hands shaking. I hadn't cried all night, not in the car, not when Margaret dismissed Lily's pie, not even when we were sent out here. But something cracked open now, not pain, but possibility. I didn't know what to say. So Ethan answered for me. She'll do it. Andrew extended a hand. I took it. It was firm, warm, grounded, not the grip of someone offering a favor, but the kind of handshake you give to someone you respect. I turned back toward the garage. The paper plates still sat on the table, the folding chairs, the leftover food, but the space felt different now. Not better, but clearer. I looked once more toward the house. They hadn't broken me. They had just missed their chance to know me. The door of the limousine shut with a muted, satisfying click, like the end of a sentence that had been waiting years to be finished. I sat there, stunned. For just a moment too long, my fingers still curled from shaking Andrew's hand. Inside, the limo was warm and impossibly quiet. Not the kind of hush you find in places designed for silence, like libraries or waiting rooms, but a comforting stillness, like the pause between heartbeats. Soft light glowed from recessed fixtures above our heads. The leather seats were plush and cool beneath me. Across from me sat a silver thermos, steam curling lazily from its open cap, and the faint scent of peppermint filled the air. Ethan climbed in behind me slowly, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to. Lily followed, eyes wide, cradling her elbows close to her chest as if afraid she might bump into something expensive. Andrew waited until the door was fully shut before he spoke. I'm not here to save you, he said gently. You've already done that. I'm here to help you be heard. For some reason, that was what undid me. Not the invitation, not the kind words, not even the thought of being on a stage, but that one sentence. I had been bracing for pity, for condescension hidden in kindness, but there was none of that. Just calm certainty and quiet respect. Lily curled up beside me, her knees pulled to her chest, coat wrapped tight around her legs. Ethan sat across from her, arms folded but looser now, more natural. His guard was still up, but not with the sharp edges it usually carried. Andrew noticed too. He didn't say anything, didn't crowd us with questions. Instead, he reached into a side compartment and handed me a folder. Inside were printed pages, neatly bound. An agenda, an invitation letter, a draft itinerary. Everything was real, tangible. Not a fantasy whispered between tears on the bathroom floor, but something structured, planned. We first found your writing last winter, he said as I thumbed through the packet. One of our interns forwarded your blog to our director of outreach. It became a talking point during our dignity and hardship campaign. The honesty, it struck something. You didn't romanticize struggle. You dignified it. I looked up, uncertain. You got all that from a couple of blog posts? He smiled. We got more than that. We got a voice. Your voice. I glanced at Ethan. He had turned slightly, his eyes watching Andrew now instead of the floor. It was subtle, but I saw it. That flicker of trust, the tiniest lean forward. We'd like you to speak at our spring summit in Chicago, Andrew continued. You'll open the weekend. It's a room full of people who need to hear from someone who understands how to build a life with both hands full and still come up short sometimes. You don't need a degree in communications. You just need to show up as yourself. I laughed softly, surprised by the sound. I'm not a public speaker, I admitted. Andrew tilted his head. You already are. You've just been doing it through a keyboard. I bit my lip, overwhelmed. I had no makeup on. My hair was frizzy from the damp garage. My boots were stained with road salt. And yet this man was offering me a stage, not because I looked the part, but because he thought I had something to say. He opened the thermos and poured a small cup of tea, passing it to me without a word. It was hot, minty, grounding. I took a sip, and for the first time all night, I let my shoulders fall. "We'll take care of everything," Andrew added. "Travel, hotel, childcare if you need it. We'll assign you a writing coach for your talk. We believe in preparing our speakers well. You won't be alone." Lily's voice piped up softly. "Mom, will you be on TV?" I laughed again, this time through the burn in my throat. "Maybe, baby, I'm not sure." She leaned into me, satisfied with the answer. "You'll look good on TV. You're already the prettiest person I know." I kissed the top of her head. Ethan said nothing, but I caught him out of the corner of my eye, sliding the foil-wrapped leftovers onto the seat next to him. Slow and careful, like they were something precious. He folded his hands in his lap and looked out the window, but his reflection on the glass showed a different kind of stillness, a calmer one, a prouder one. I turned back to Andrew. "Okay," I said. "I'll do it." He didn't cheer or exclaim. He simply nodded, like it was the answer he already expected. Outside, the car began to move. Slowly, gently, we pulled away from the garage, from the side of the house, from the echo of laughter that had never included us. I looked through the tinted window as we passed the front. There they were. Margaret, Caroline, and Blake stood at the bay window, partially obscured by the curtains they had tried too late to close. Their faces were lit by the warm chandelier behind them, but their expressions were anything but warm. They weren't angry. They weren't smug. They were stunned. Like the universe had just flipped a script they'd written decades ago, and suddenly I was no longer a supporting character in their well-rehearsed play. I was something else. Someone else. They hadn't lost me to the garage. They had simply overlooked the fact that sometimes the people you exile come back with more power than you ever imagined. The car turned the corner, the house slipping out of view. I didn't look back again. There were no crystal glasses or napkin rings at our table. Just chipped mugs filled with hot chocolate, honest words shared between bites of leftover pancakes, and 3 chairs that finally felt like home. It had been a few months since Thanksgiving, though some days it felt like a lifetime. The snow was long gone from our street, traded for gray puddles and the tentative promise of spring. From the kitchen window of our small apartment, I could see the bare tree outside beginning to swell with green. It wasn't beautiful yet, just hopeful. Hope had become something we recognized in pieces. I sat at the dining table, the same wobbly one I'd bought off Craigslist 6 years ago, reading through my keynote draft for the 7th time. A red pen rested beside me, uncapped, its ink trailing into the margins like rivers of uncertainty. My laptop hummed softly. Notes covered the fridge behind me. Reminders, ideas, Lily's drawings, Ethan's quotes, scribbled in pencil. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The cursor blinked like it was waiting for something profound. But I didn't need profound. I needed real. Across from me, Ethan sat quietly with a blue notebook open in his lap. He had grown into silence lately. Not out of sadness, but introspection. He tapped the edge of his pencil against his knee, then flipped a page. I caught a glimpse of neat lines written in careful print, a stanza at the top. Chairs don't make the table. Love does. I swallowed around the sudden warmth in my throat. "You writing about me?" I teased. He looked up, not embarrassed, but soft-eyed. "I'm writing about all of us." I smiled and turned back to my laptop, blinking against tears. In the corner, Lily was cutting construction paper into oddly shaped hearts and stars. Her tongue peeked out slightly as she concentrated, scissors squeaking every few seconds. She'd already taped a crooked banner across the kitchen wall. "Thanks for real family." "Are we going to make the mashed sweet potatoes again?" she asked. "Of course," I said. "And we don't need matching forks, right?" "Not unless you want to," I replied. She grinned, glue stick in hand. "Good. Matching is boring." I laughed, and for a moment the entire apartment felt brighter. At night, after they went to bed, I'd practice the speech aloud. Sometimes I whispered it while washing dishes or murmured paragraphs into the mirror. My voice still cracked in parts, especially when I spoke about the garage, but each time it cracked less. One evening, as I recited the closing paragraph, Ethan wandered into the room and sat cross-legged on the floor. He didn't say anything until I finished. Then he nodded once and said, "That part about building your own table, keep it. It sounds like you." Lily clapped from the hallway, her hands still sticky from making cookie dough hearts. "You sounded like someone on a podcast," she beamed, "but better." Later that night, I found an old photo of me, barely 21, holding newborn Ethan, cheeks pale, hair tied up in a messy bun, the fatigue of survival behind my eyes. I remembered that girl. I remembered how often she cried in the kitchen when no one was watching, how many nights she stayed up Googling things like how to stretch rent and how to explain disappointment to kids gently. I closed the browser and opened a new tab. I posted a piece titled "More Than Scraps." By morning, it had already been shared a few dozen times. By noon, a publisher emailed, "Your voice matters. Let's talk." I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I didn't believe it, but because, for the first time, I realized I might finally believe in myself. The next day, Lily asked, "Can we have Thanksgiving here this year? Just us, and maybe Miss Roberta from downstairs, 'cause she said she doesn't have anyone." I looked around the apartment. The walls were chipped. The carpet was worn. But the couch was big enough for a few extra hugs, and the oven still worked when you coaxed it just right. "Absolutely," I said. "No booster seats," she added firmly. "No booster seats," I agreed. That evening, I watched Ethan iron the blouse I planned to wear to Chicago. He didn't say a word, just laid it flat on the counter, pressing slowly, with a precision I hadn't taught him, but that he'd learned anyway. I noticed the sleeves of his sweatshirt were mismatched, one from his school, the other plain, and I smiled. I stood at the fridge, rereading a note I'd written to myself in marker weeks ago. "You don't have to be chosen to be worthy." Lily came up behind me and slid a folded piece of pink paper into my suitcase. She didn't try to hide it. "I already know you'll be amazing," she said, "so I wrote it down, in case you forget while you're talking." I pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. Ethan stood by the window, looking out into the street where the tree had finally begun to bud. "It's weird," he said, almost to himself. "I don't think I hate them anymore." I didn't ask who them meant. I didn't need to. Instead, I turned back to my open laptop, where the title of my keynote now glowed at the top of the page, "More Than Scraps." And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was trying to fit into a story someone else wrote. I was writing my own. I stood at the podium, hands trembling, not from nerves, but from something deeper. Recognition, not of the crowd in front of me, or the hotel ballroom with its soft chandelier glow, or the curved microphone inches from my mouth. No, I was recognizing myself, in the place I never thought I'd be allowed to stand. 300 chairs stretched before me, filled with women of every shape, age, and story. Some wore tailored suits, others wore denim jackets over floral dresses. There were teachers, nonprofit directors, social workers, single moms with toddlers in tow, and retirees who'd come because the topic said, "Rebuilding after you've been told you don't belong." A faint jazz melody faded behind me as the host stepped away. The room quieted, the kind of quiet that isn't silence, it's listening. I inhaled slowly, touched the edge of the podium with my fingertips to steady myself, and began. When I arrived, for Thanksgiving last year, I brought sweet potato pie. I wore my best secondhand coat. My kids held their heads high, and still, we were sent to the garage. I paused, let the words settle. They told me, without saying it directly, that we weren't real family, that we were a burden, that our presence was something to be placed politely out of sight. Several women in the front row leaned forward. One clutched a tissue. But that night, in that cold garage, with folding chairs and paper plates and green beans gone stiff, something changed. Not in them, in me. I looked out over the room, no longer afraid. I could see it in their faces. Understanding, empathy, fire. The kind of knowing that doesn't require explanation. I realized I'd spent years trying to be chosen, trying to smile wide enough, work hard enough, shrink small enough, and still the door never truly opened. A woman near the back nodded slowly, tears on her cheeks. My son asked why no one stood up for us. My daughter asked if we'd done something wrong, and I realized this wasn't about my worth. It was about what I'd taught myself to accept. I let that sit. Then I told them about the limousine, about Andrew, about how the invitation that changed my life didn't come from the people I'd tried to impress. It came from someone who had simply seen me. I don't stand here today because I was rescued, I said. I stand here because someone held up a mirror and said, "You matter. Your story matters." A quiet clap started in the third row, then another, not thunderous, just solid, affirming. Women looked at each other and nodded. I could see it in their eyes, the connection that happens when someone finally says out loud what you've been whispering in your own head for years. I used to think love was something you earned, something you work toward like a paycheck, but now I know love makes space. It doesn't need you to prove you belong. I closed my speech with the same line I'd typed in bold at the top of my manuscript. They put me in the garage, but that's how the limo found me. The room erupted, not in wild applause, but in a rising, emotional tide of standing women, clapping with open palms and open hearts. When I stepped down, Andrew was waiting at the edge of the stage. He didn't say anything right away, just placed a hand gently on my shoulder and nodded. "You did exactly what we hoped," he said. "You reminded them, and maybe yourself, that worthiness was never up for debate." An hour later, a woman from the publishing team approached me with a quiet smile and a printed draft of a contract. I didn't cry this time. I just read the subject line, "Your voice matters." But the real moment came weeks later. It was Thanksgiving again. Our apartment smelled of cinnamon and cornbread. The table was too small, so we spread blankets and floor cushions in the living room. Roberta from downstairs brought apple cider. 2 of Ethan's teachers showed up with pies. Lily's best friend came wearing fairy wings and spilled cranberry sauce on the rug. No one minded. The lights were warm. The music was low. Laughter moved from corner to corner like it had always lived here. I caught Ethan helping Lily balance a plate as she passed around rolls. He looked older somehow. Still quiet, but lighter. After the meal, as we cleaned up the plates and folded the paper turkeys Lily had crafted for everyone, she tugged on my sleeve. "I'm glad they put us in the garage," she said matter-of-factly. I looked at her, half smiling. "Yeah?" She nodded. "Because that's how the limo found us." I froze, spoon still in my hand. Sometimes children speak in truths we're too scared to touch. I walked to the wall where we'd hung photos from the past year, the summit, the writing nights, the school project Ethan had titled Poems for Grown-Ups Who Forget They Matter. Beneath the pictures, I taped up a piece of cardboard hand-lettered in blue marker by Lily. "This is our table. Everyone's welcome." And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was on the outside looking in. I felt like the host. That night, as we passed around pie and stories on the floor of our little apartment, I looked at the sign Lily had made. "This is our table. Everyone's welcome." And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just invited. I belonged. Sometimes the people who shut you out are simply unable to see beyond their own expectations. But love, real love, makes room, not rules. You don't need matching silverware to build something sacred. You need warmth, honesty, and the courage to open your own door. If this story reminded you of a moment when you had to choose yourself or build something from what was left, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your voice matters here, too.